That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of Only Human. Title of the episode today is Bad News Doesn't Improve with Age. And that's also the title of our Blue Threat Proverb of the Week. Here's the deal. Unlike wine or anything else that gets better over time, bad news tends to spoil. It festers inside of you. And sometimes by delaying communicating bad news, it gets even worse. So we're going to talk today about how not only we can deliver bad news to others, but how when we receive it, we can do that in the best version of ourselves. It's a pretty interesting topic, and I'm gonna start with kind of this overarching statement. You're not fully grown until you know how to communicate, apologize, be honest and truthful, and accept accountability for things without making excuses or blaming somebody else. Every time we get the opportunity to take accountability and not make an excuse and communicate the situation, the stronger we become and the better we become as people. So it's not always going to be something that you did wrong that you have to communicate, but that's the worst case scenario. So let's start with the most difficult. Something you did that ended badly and it's going to impact others. It's painful. But you just have to do it, right? So we're going to walk through a few specific principles and a few general principles about that today. And I want to start with my example, the earliest example I can recall. It was a big deal. I was 12 years old. And I was in a family where my father, my two brothers, and I were all snowmobile racers in our various age groups. I lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This was in the 1960s when it was just getting started. And my dad had really just made a big investment. We just purchased a Polaris TX500 snowmobile. Now, not by today's standard, but back then, the TX500 was a high-performance racing machine. It was pretty heavy, and you touched that throttle and it took off. And this was a big deal for us because we'd been racing for a couple of years on older machines, Arctic Cats and Ski-Doos, and we'd really upgraded this year. We just pulled it off the trailer and started it up, and that we had the Hearth 600 twin in there, man. It just, right? And so we got it off. My dad drove it around the house a little bit. We had about 2 feet of snow, and I said, "Hey, can I drive the circuit around the yard like you just did?" It was probably, I don't know, an eighth of a mile around the property up there. And he said, "Yeah, just take it slow. Okay, there's a lot of horsepower here. It's got a lot of get up and go." And so he went inside. You can see where this is going, right? So I take it and I just get it going a little bit. And I get about halfway around the first loop and I open it up a little bit more and I go, wow, this thing's really powerful. I come around for the second lap and I take it down about half throttle and this thing just leaps out from underneath me, but still controllable, right? And by the time I came around for the third lap in the yard, I built up sort of some banks on the curves. And I came around the third curve in the yard. And this was going to be my last one. I'd already decided, right? Because we had to put it away. And I opened the throttle up. I banked off that third curve. The skis came off the ground. I tried to steer away. And I smacked right into the rear end of our station wagon. We had a Rambler Nash station wagon. This would have been about 1968, I guess. and it knocked the entire cab off of the snowmobile, bent one of the skis, and I shut it down. Now there's no question that my father heard that, right? So I waited for the door to fly open and him come out. He was not a very tolerant man about his kids not following his directions. So I thought for about 15 seconds, and I said, it's only going to get worse if I wait. So I got up and I walked in and I faced him. He was sitting at the coffee table. And I said, I hit the car with a snow machine, and it knocked the cab off. And he looked at me, he said, the snow machine or the car? And I knew right then it was probably going to be okay, but the fact that I faced it and the fact that he received it in that way, I mean, there was lots of punishment to come. He basically told me I wasn't going to be able to race that year. And what's kind of sad about that is that I never raced again because during that year my parents split up and I ended up moving away. But that moment taught me how important it was to be able to communicate bad news quickly. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, right? I could have killed myself or done a lot more damage, and we fixed everything up. My brothers and my dad had a really good year that year racing with a new machine. So that's kind of an extreme example from an early day in my life. I've had to deliver bad news since that time, probably, I don't know, scores if not hundreds of times. And each time I do it, I think I get a little bit better at it because I recognize how important that precise communication is at that time. So it's not always about something you did wrong, though, right? Just a few common examples. Maybe you're going to miss a deadline at work, and you're not sure whether to tell the boss right now or to wait a little while. Maybe something will change, right? The longer you wait, the less opportunity you're giving for your boss to get you help or try to help you with the challenge to meet the deadline, whatever. So, maybe it's something about a financial issue or a health issue. Maybe it's with your workplace, maybe it's with your family. But regardless of the situation, there's one common thing happening. You are absolutely going to make someone's life more difficult. Could be your boss, could be a colleague, could be a family member. And that's hard for a lot of us. And it's becoming harder in a world where we seldom really talk much face to face. I made a joke about the text I got, trying to get me to click on some random link here. But today, if you've got bad news to deliver, there's a lot of choices on what channel you want to deliver it in, right? Maybe you text somebody, maybe you send them an email. Email seems to be a big thing at work, Type something up, I'm sorry, but this has happened. That's the wrong way to do it, right? I want to give you sort of an outline for delivering bad news, but the first guidance is, if at all possible, it needs to be done in person. If it can't be done directly face-to-face, it needs to be done in real-time voice, right? Like a call or a Teams meeting or a Zoom or something like that. You don't deliver bad news via email. It's just poor form. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. And it's also very important that if we have an opportunity to do something like I'm doing here today, where you can see me if you're not just listening to me on the radio, you can read my body language and I can read your body language. So let's take us through, step by step, some things we can do to get better at delivering bad news. First of all, once you're recognizing that there's something wrong that you need to communicate, you need to instantly think about one question. Who else needs to know? Who else needs to know this, right? And assume they need to know it pretty quickly. That's part of your preparation is, how long can I wait? How long should I wait to get this up channel to the boss or tell my wife or my spouse or my kids or my friends or whatever it is. Right? But the most important thing that you can do before you leap into the communication is prepare. So how do we prepare? First of all, make sure you understand it. Make sure the information that you're getting is accurate, right? Maybe you got a health diagnosis and it's pretty bad. It's pretty severe. Maybe you do wait for that second opinion. Once you are pretty confident that you've got your head wrapped around what that news is and what it means, think about all the relevant facts and details and questions that might be asked, right? So maybe I come in and I say, listen, they just took a chest x-ray and there's some things there they're going to want to look at. And I'm going to need to go in for a week to the hospital to get some fairly extensive testing. What questions are you going to be asked? Oh my gosh, what could it be, right? What's the worst it could be? Maybe that's from your spouse. Maybe your boss is, how long are you going to be out? Maybe it's, is there anything I can do to help? Think of the responses that you might get, kind of in your mind, wander through those a little bit. As you're doing that, you need to assess the impact on the person you're communicating with. Right? Is this going to devastate them? Right? Is it going to result in an emotional response? Back to my story about wrecking the snow machine back in the 1960s, my dad could have, and maybe even should have, responded more emotionally. Instead, he diffused the whole thing with humor. Did you knock the cab off the car, or did you knock it off the snow machine? And then I got to the adrenaline got me, that machine's fast. I know I shouldn't have been doing that. And I got to the whys behind the what. Right? So you assess the impact. Who's going to be affected? What are the emotional implications on them? What are the professional implications, right? If you did something wrong, is it going to be bad news for the organization? Is it going to be bad news for the boss? Are there other colleagues or peers involved? How big or small is this challenge? So you think that through. That's part of the preparation. Third part of the preparation is to plan the delivery, right? The right channel, I already said that, should be face-to-face if possible. Phone call. If you have to send an email or a text, is, I need to talk to you about something important. Please call me as soon as you can, right? If you have the ability, choose the right time and the right place to communicate. And then have a good opening line. And I have one, I've used it a dozen times or more. I train it to people in our company. We are all well aware that we need to communicate bad news quickly here at Convergent Performance. And the standard line is, I have some unfortunate but important news to share with you. And what that canned line lets the receiver know this is serious, right? And that lets them emotionally adjust. So as you're planning the delivery, think of that first line, and feel free to steal mine. I have some unfortunate but important news to share with you. Then get right to it, right? Don't make your message clear, make it concise, be respectful, and practice the empathy. You know that they're going to. You're making their life worse, right? So they could respond in a variety of ways. Just anticipate that. I think the second thing you need to do, you've already sort of prepared them. You've given them the warning, right? I got some unfortunate news. But you need to get the bottom line out there pretty quickly, right? Be direct, be honest. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to say, here's what we should do about this next. Don't use vague language. Clearly state the problem. I ran the snow machine into the car and I knocked the cab off it. Only then is it time for you to pause, right? You want to say, I've got some important news. And they say, what is it? You give them the news and you pause. Give them a moment or two to process that information. If there's no immediate response, what I tend to suggest and what I like to do personally is, would you like to hear a little bit more about how and why this happened and what I think the implications are? Maybe even a couple of ideas I have for solutions. You're not giving it to them, you're asking them if they'd like to hear that. And the answer may be no, right? No, right now, all I want to do is sit and think about this, at which point you've done the best you can. Now, if you do get an opportunity or you are requested to give context and explanation, remember that line I said in the very beginning, right? To truly grow as human beings, we have to be able to take responsibility for things that are our fault. Sometimes to grow as professionals, depending on our position of leadership or followership, sometimes we have to take accountability for things that were done by others on our watch, right? So it's really important as you're providing context, even if you're saying, Bobby was using the wrong equipment and fell off the ladder when he was trying to fix the engine or something. Say, I take full responsibility for this. I should have been watching, but one of our employees was using the wrong equipment and fell off and injured themselves. You're taking accountability, and that goes a long way in maturing the conversation. Right? Then you may want to go into some of the relevant background. Right? Like I had to with my dad. I said, the first couple of times I went around really slow, but once I hit the throttle, I got so excited. I didn't expect it to jump out from underneath me like that. I should have listened to you. I'm sorry. That simple and concise explanation, especially when it comes from a 12-year-old boy that thinks he's about to get his ass whipped, was a big step for me, right? So the last thing, and this is kind of it's not really the last thing, it's the fourth thing, and we're going to do that in just 1 minute, right after a word from our sponsor.
Have you ever finished the latest bestseller on habits or personal performance and asked, yeah, okay, but how? All the improvements you visualize while reading the books require one thing to achieve in your own life: deliberate practice, a new way of focusing attention inside the routine to drive consistent improvement with every experience. Focused on getting the biggest impact from your career development opportunities, the Deliberate Practice of Professionalism course from Convergent Performance teaches you the steps and requirements to achieve improvement and mastery of your targets. Discover how deliberate practice can springboard your improvement efforts, no matter what they might be or your current skill level. Join us on our website at convergentperformance.com and click the link for e-learning to sign up for this exciting program today.
I say manage the reaction, but you're never going to manage the reaction, but be prepared for the reaction. You're going to perhaps get an emotional blowback. You may well get some anger, and that's expected. You need to be patient and understanding with the response, even if it's not what you hope for. It was you that brought the bad news, and so you have to acknowledge how they feel and why they feel that way. And then it's just fine to sit silently in that conversation until the point comes where you say, okay, what are we going to do about this? What can I do to help you sort this out? Are there any questions I can answer for you? Any more information that I need to get or that you would like? And probably most importantly, what can I do to help us through this? So those basic steps, right? Prepare for the conversation. Don't delay it, right? Unless it's necessary to get a little more information to prepare or something like that. Get right to the point. Give them a little bit of a heads up and warning. I've got some unfortunate information, but it's important I share it with you. Get right to the point. Don't sugarcoat it. Take responsibility where it's supposed to be taken. Try not to throw anybody else under the bus. Let them process the information, answer as much as you can, and offer support. That's how you deliver bad news. Now, last step is when you're done with it and you're walking out the door, don't miss an opportunity to learn. Right? What could you have done better? What didn't you expect that occurred? How will you be ready for that next time? Just a good debrief from an opportunity that we don't get very often, and it's a real chance to grow. So now let's flip it. Go to the other side. You're the one receiving the bad news. And the reason that I saved this for last is because we just went through how difficult it can be to deliver it. And the first thing we need to understand as a boss, as a family member, as a father, a husband, whatever it is that it's difficult for that person to tell us that. And one of my very first responses, if I can't be as funny as my dad was, right, is to say, I know how difficult this must have been for you to come and tell me. Thank you for doing that. We've established this. I'm not going to freak out. I'm here to talk. I'm here to listen. I'm here to understand, right? That simple phrase, just like the phrase when you're delivering bad news, I have some important but unfortunate information. That phrase when you receive it that says, I know how difficult this must have been for you. Thank you for coming and telling me so promptly. Does the same thing. It brings the unit together, and now we can work on solving the challenge that we face, right? So what else can we do? We want to understand the problem in the same way that the person that's telling us understands it, because we may have to share this news upwards or outwards ourselves, right? So the next step for anybody that's receiving bad news is asking that same question: who else needs to know? And am I the best person to take it forward, or should this person have to go through all this again? Right? So I think the real essence of delivering bad news and receiving bad news is to quickly forge that bond between the two communicators. One that says, I know I need to bring this to you, and it's not going to be good news. The other that says, I know how difficult it was for you to bring it. Thank you. That now we're two adults, two human beings working on the same problem. There may be a whole bunch of other things you need to do subsequently. You may have to schedule more meetings. You may need to check in on it later. You may have some things you can do together, things that each of you need to go and find more information so you understand it better. But the most important thing from either the sender side or the receiver side is that you follow up, right? Thanks. We're going to talk about this more by the end of the week, I promise you. Right? We're not going to let this just fester. We're going to talk more about this. We're going to make sure we support each other, and we're going to communicate more. I think as a receiver, you also owe yourself that opportunity to debrief. Did you react too emotionally? Did you lash out? Did you search for the whys behind it before you got the what of what happened? All those things are opportunities for us to grow, and we grow around these hopefully rare opportunities we get to communicate bad news. So the last thing I want to do as we kind of wrap this up, a little bit shorter today, but I think it was an important topic, is understand how this particular communication should guide all of our communications, right? We should always think about, when possible, face-to-face or voice communications via emails or texts for important issues. We should always prepare. We should always have a good opening line and get right to the point. We should always be honest and offer support. And on the reverse of that, we should always be listening. You're going to actively listen for sure when somebody says, I have some important but unfortunate news. Okay, you have my attention, right? But why can't we use that same kind of skill set in our everyday work or family conversations? You have my full attention. I'm listening. How can I help? What can I do? That's fascinating. All of those interactive elements that are so critical when we're communicating bad news are just as critical when we're communicating anything. So listen, I really, really like this topic. We're going to talk a lot about communications in the weeks to come because I know from lots of years of analysis and research that behind human errors, especially those that cause accidents and incidents and quality escapes and all sorts of injuries, that poor communication is involved in well over half of them, right? So from a pure safety and quality in the workplace standpoint, we all need to learn to communicate a little bit better and a little bit more clearly. But also, I think it's a quality of life issue that in the 21st century is languishing, mostly because of these little 2x4-inch boxes we carry around that we think is all we need to communicate with each other. As we get further and further isolated, the importance of the clarity, the courtesy of our communications when we do get an opportunity to talk couldn't be more important. So listen, that's it for today. I appreciate you all tuning in. Like always, like, share, subscribe, share these things, man. We're growing an international community. I think we're really making some progress here. I appreciate everything, all of you that tune in every week. And like always, keep getting better at everything you do by virtue of who you are, where you are, with the resources at hand. See you next time.